Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello and welcome to the Rational League, your favorite show of the week. You start your week, you come into the Rational League. Right away, you hear the rational talks, but not very rational sometimes. Sometimes irrational. But we're missing Tom the Fraud, who his player got dropped out of the England. So he chose to hide, of course.
Yeah, so we dropped him.
We dropped Southgate dropped Trent, so we decided to drop Tom, of course. But big up everybody that is. Make sure to hit that like button. We're speaking about PSR. Is it killing the league? Is it gonna drive talent outside the Premier League? Of course, we'll touch on the leaks or the guy that threatened to leak documents about Manchester City. Somehow, I saw a lot of TikToks, I saw a lot of talks, and I thought it's the best one to talk about it is Nobbins, of course, because he's educated on the matter. Of course, we'll talk about Chelsea shortlist with your favorite Chelsea fan, Dan, of course. The people that say, Dan, you hate our club. That's what people actually label Dan. You hate Chelsea. You're not a Chelsea fan. And Nico Williams between Liverpool and Arsenal, of course. And we had an absolutely very interesting discussion yesterday about is it to Arsenal? Do Arsenal fans favor the move? Now, a lot of topics to talk about, but I'm here with the guys. And before even we start, make sure to get us to 100 likes. And also all these guys' channels. Rory, 6:30 p.m. Rory, 12:30 for me. 6:30, that's why I tune in. 6:30 UK time, Rory, every day. And Nobbins with the videos, the tactical analysis, the watch-alongs for the Euros, and Dan with the Chelsea content, of course. All these channels, all you have to do is just one click away from your subscriptions. Let's get Rory to 20K. Let's get Nobbins to 20K. And we want Dan to get to 10K right away, of course.
That's
And
far off.
Tom, don't care about him because he's gonna get dropped. Don't care about Tom. But his channel is in the description, of course. 200 people here right off the bat, so hit that like button, people. Subscribe. Where do we start? Where do we start, guys?
Start on Trent getting dropped, I reckon. Just because it just happened. And
Okay.
then we'll
Trent
move
got
from there.
dropped, so I don't see it as a big deal. The big deal is playing Kona Gallagher.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, like Trent getting dropped is not a shock. Okay, he dropped. You prefer Kyle Walker because of defensives, whatever, right? But to choose to play Kona Gallagher, someone is worse. So Trent's main problem, the first 2 games, is getting on the ball with the back to the goal, turning and playing the 6 rule. What you do, you play someone that doesn't even have the elite attributes on the ball to play that role. It's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. It's the dropping Trent. I mean, I wouldn't have dropped Trent. I'd have just moved him to right back. But dropping him, bringing Gallagher in. Why have we taken Wharton and Mainu at this point? We may as well have taken Jordan Henderson. If they're not going to play, you may as well take Jordan Henderson. At least he's been there and got the experience and, can be an additional leader in the dressing room. So, it's literally a defensive move for a game against fucking Slovenia. All respect to Slovenia, but if we need to make a defensive change for a game against Slovenia, you don't hold out much hope for any of the knockout games.
Take it the other way. Maybe he wants to press, and Kona Gallagher will be the presser.
But Trent can press.
No, he cannot.
How much possession do you think Slovenia's going to have?
Slovenia.
Don't need great presses on the pitch.
Well, hold on. It's not about Slovenia now. It's turning to be about England and Southgate approach. That is the main problem now. When people talk about, the opposition is going to do this. Well, you wouldn't expect it to be dominated for about 80 minutes against Denmark and a whole of a second half or 60 minutes against Serbia. It's because of the approach of this guy, Southgate. So I don't know. Listen, I'm not defending that decision. Kona Gallagher should not be playing.
No.
Kona Gallagher should not be in the England team, in my opinion. As good as he was for Chelsea this season, and I say he was a utility player, he was used, he wasn't bad at Chelsea, but there are far better players out there to be starting and ahead of him in the England team before you take Kona Gallagher. But for you to drop Trent and start Kona Gallagher, you're really sending a message, as Rory said. It doesn't matter. Your football ability doesn't matter. How good you are doesn't matter. I'm just going to pick the guys that I favor for running or defending, which is...
The only good thing is that he's the only England player that's already got a booking. So one more booking and he'll be suspended for the next game. So then
it's only 7 days. Yeah?
And he'll probably get booked. Connor's pretty good at picking up bookings.
Oh, he'll get booked. He will get booked.
10 minutes is booked, guys.
I think the worrying thing for me with Conor Gallagher getting into this England team is it kind of just shows the lack of energy that every other player seems to have at the moment in this tournament. Is that it feels like Southgate's using Conor Gallagher to inject some energy into the team, which is worrying because why does it have to come from a player like Conor to sort of boost our players up a little bit in terms of how much running they're willing to do and things like that on the pitch, that they need a player who most would consider subpar to them in terms of ability?
They shouldn't.
It's spineless from Southgate. He's made many errors. Didn't take a proper left back. Well, sorry, apologies. Didn't take a fit left back. Didn't take any other left-footed defender. He's managed himself into a situation where it's become politically impossible to drop Walker because he made him vice captain, and because I'd say that I'm the biggest Walker critic. I'd say he and Gahey have probably been our best players across the 2 games. Yeah. It now becomes impossible to drop Walker, but you can't have Walker and Trent on the pitch at the same time. But you need Trent on the pitch because of what he offers going forwards. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous management and decision making from Southgate, and it's an attempt to solve a not even the most pressing problem that England currently have at the moment. There are many things that we need to do in this England side. If dropping Trent is one of them, then it's not fine, but there can be a solution worked in there, but the answer is not Gallagher. This will not solve our left side dynamic issues. and I'm genuinely concerned about a game against Slovenia.
Yeah, because if you draw the game,
that's what it's come to.
We play Germany.
Yeah, exactly. We need to top our group.
Otherwise, you'll beat Germany. There's Spain.
Because now, if England top their group, they go into the left side of the draw. The teams currently on the right side of the draw, as things stand, are Germany and France and Spain and Portugal. So ideally, I'd like to try to avoid those teams for as long as possible. I know you've got to play someone harder, eventually the low, whatever. I get that, but I still want to be in the easier side of the draw.
No, France is on the other side, Nobbins. So France, Belgium, Italy.
If they finish second, right now they would go to the right side.
Well, France will finish first. Why do you assume France is going to second?
Because
I'm saying as things stand,
that's good in the last game against.
They're currently second. Respect Ake and the Netherlands. Yes, they might top their group.
If Netherlands win their final game and keep their goal difference ahead of France, then they top the group.
Actually, France's goal difference is higher. That's France's goal difference.
France's goal difference of 1.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Same goal difference, but goals scored.
France haven't looked that good either, have they? Like they look pretty slow.
To be fair,
I actually don't think the Netherlands will beat Austria anyway.
Austria have been really good for me.
That is on the side. I think France will smash Poland anyway.
Does anyone think Austria are dark horses under?
Well, so this,
they are low key going to knock us out, Dan. In the round of 16, they're going to knock us out.
As it stands, the most because obviously it depends who finishes third and which third place teams go through. But statistically, as it stands, the most likely third place team that's going to end up against us is Austria. And I think they beat us. So
I think they look really good.
There's one thing worrying about finishing second in the group and coming up against Germany, but we can top the group and end up against Austria and still get knocked out. So,
Nobbins, do you think Trent is essential to this England side being really, really good? And do you not think that this England side have been okay without Trent in years gone by?
When was the last time we were good?
Probably
this last World Cup you weren't as bad.
I don't know. Last
World Cup should have won against France if Harry Kane.
But we weren't good, so we didn't know. I would say the Euros.
That fact thing, that good thing is subjective, though.
You don't necessarily
need now you look bad.
Portugal when they won it in 2016 weren't exactly setting the world on fire.
Exactly. Now you look bad. Now you look bad. But I didn't think that.
The World Cup we weren't bad.
Exactly.
When we beat Iran 6-2.
And by the way, against France, it wasn't the worst performance. You literally should have won the game if Harry Kane didn't put that penalty above the bar. And you missed quite a lot of chances against France in that game, if I remember correctly. England, on paper and stats-wise, I think, if I can remember correctly, that was 2 years ago, looked like a better team. And everyone was disappointed. Yes, France went there and they had the greatest final and all the stuff, but England weren't a pushover in that game. You weren't dominated. You didn't look bad at all. You didn't sit back. I thought that game was all right from England that time. This is, to be honest, the first time I see England that bad. It's bad. It looks horrific.
I just think if you've got a player like Trent, then you find a way to make it work whilst it's still being balanced. And there are many ways to do that. But again, Southgate's made it so that you can't because you can't really play Walker and Trent in the same team. I'm not happy Trent's not performing that well in midfield, but lots of people, myself included, were like, well, Trent's not a midfielder. Don't play me in house in that midfield. Big difference between midfield and inverted fullback. Same with John Stones. He's not a midfielder. Don't play him there. The only way you can really make it work now is because our left back situation's abhorrent anyway. You might as well just shove Trent at left back at this point. That's the only way you're going to get. That's the only way you're going to get Walker and Trent into the same team, and it's sort of half making a bit of sense. It's not going to work with Trent in midfield, as we've established. He's not going to drop Walker, so it's now become a situation of you either bench Trent or you just shove him at left back and see what happens. It'll probably be a terrible thing, but it's probably better than Trippier there, in fairness.
Yeah,
Trent at left back to do what? What is his role?
I don't know. I don't even know. Do like a crew
situation. So basically, Nobbins is trying to force Trent into the lineup because he's a good player, because to please.
But I don't want Walker in the lineup. Is the point?
Really?
But Walker's been.
I think Walker is one of the most important players for England
right now.
He's shit going forwards though.
He wasn't that bad in the first game.
Rory, in this tournament, he has been all right. He has been all right, and he made plenty of overlaps. to help Saka. So.
Yeah, but then he doesn't do anything with it unless he gets lucky. He's not good going forwards.
That's kind of like that's a very harsh way to say it. Like he doesn't do anything. No,
I've seen it enough for City.
Exactly. See, you're judging it based on City, but I'm judging it based on what I saw in the first 2 games. He looked all right.
Do you not think also like Walker kind of gives the opposition something to think about in terms of what strengths they sort of have out on their left wing? They know that they can't just always use that outlet in terms of a player being fast. Whereas if Trent's there and Trent's pushing forward, leaves a lot of space in behind, his recovery isn't nearly as good as Walker's. Do you not think
100%. The field will be tilted left.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Right
I think Walker adds a little bit of balance.
The field look like this right away.
Especially without a left back, I feel like to have someone like Walker at right back offers a little bit more solidarity on that side when the left side is very limited at the moment, isn't it, this tournament?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just think we need Trent on the pitch.
I just think that if Trent is in the side or not in the side,
we'll go back to talk about the Premier League and stuff. To be honest,
yeah, but I just
tired of it anymore.
If Trent isn't in the team, I don't think this England side is. If Gallagher's in the team, I think the team is weaker. If Trent isn't in the side and players are moved about to fit other players into their right positions, I don't think the England team is weaker. I think the England team becomes weaker when Trent is replaced for Gallagher, though.
So Kobe Mainoo next to Declan Rice, I think that looks better than Trent next to Kobe.
I think there's no reason not to play Jude there because both games I've seen him, he looked more like an 8 than a 10.
Yeah, big up, Dan. Big up.
I think Jude could play there alongside Rice, and I think quite comfortably you put Foden in his right position because he's earned the right to be playing there, at least for one more group game. If Foden just doesn't look like he's going to perform in England shirt after one more game, then potentially you start reconsidering what happens with that role. Saka on the right. Do I think that's enough time, by the way? No, I'm just saying right now in the immediacy of this tournament, maybe you change it up. Saka on the right, Gordon on the left, Kane up the top. And to be honest, Harry Kane, he's not been great, but I feel like this tournament, this team is the furthest away from playing to Harry Kane's strengths that we've had on the South.
Can you give me the lineup then with that lineup, Dan, please?
Yeah, I think it's basically the same, but it'll just be Gordon for Trent.
Oh.
And that's
Gordon for Trent, drop Bellingham deeper, Foden in the middle.
Okay. So
because I think even when
it's a 5-5.
Huh?
Basically 5-5. 5 defensive players, 5 offensive players, basically.
Yeah, but I think the thing with Rice and Jude is that they're so dynamic. They actually almost bypassed Trent in that first game. That Trent
Here's the problem with Trent at the 10.
Past him.
It's not a dig at Trent before anybody gets triggered. Trent, as a football player, and I said that before, is 100% offensive, 0 defensive player, which is why he's a Man City player and he shines at Man City. The Jude Bellingham is more of a 60-40 or 70-30. The problem with playing in modern football, someone like Foden in the 10, you need to compensate for him, basically. You need to compensate for his lack of defensive attributes. He doesn't defend. He's not asked to defend at City. He's asked to press. It's a completely different than defending, than going in tackles, than doing interceptions and doing the coverage for your winger and stuff like that, which is, for example, Odegaard sometimes does this. Even Maddison does this, the new 8s. Eze does this, that the 8s, the 10/8. Foden is so offensive that you will need to compensate for him massively by having Saka and Gordon drop deep. So basically end up to 4-4-2. Which is some of the rules that sometimes Kevin De Bruyne used to play when you play behind Haaland, which is 2 guys forward, basically, and everyone else is defending. Even Jack Grealish and Bernardo Silva used to defend, basically. Will Southgate do that? I don't know. Will Saka defend and Gordon defend and Jude Bellingham defend enough to compensate for Foden? No, he's brilliant going forward. Defensively, he's 0. In modern football, Foden needs a team like Man City to play that 10. Otherwise, he will need to be...
Let's worry about our on-ball issues before we worry about the defensive ones. Let's actually try to create some chances before we then consider what are the defensive frailties. That's been the main issue with England.
But don't you think Southgate think like that? Like, this is why he doesn't want to play Trent in the 10.
Do you mean Foden in the 10? Sorry.
Foden. I'm sorry. Foden. Yes, sorry.
It might be, but I don't think Southgate's a good manager, so I don't really care what he thinks. Quite frankly, that sounds harsh, but I don't really care what he thinks.
Do you think Trent struggled being in midfield because I was there watching him in that first game, and I just felt like he was really struggling to cope with a whole 360 sort of picture of the pitch. Like, you know, when if you play right back, you always got your back to a touchline. There's never a threat coming from one whole side. And I felt like, for me, that's when I was watching Trent, I felt like that's what he was struggling with the most. I felt like his awareness wasn't quite good enough to cope with playing in a midfield role like that. And I feel like that's where he became a little bit of a liability. He looked a little bit lost at times.
The weakness that Trent has is that he just isn't a good scanner, right? He doesn't scan over his shoulder.
Because he's never needed to.
Yeah, but even at right back, a lot, if you look at when he does get caught out, a lot of the time he gets caught out because he doesn't clock someone running from behind his shoulder and they get to a header before him. That's one of his biggest frailties, is conceding goals at the back post like that. And obviously that becomes a much bigger problem in midfield, especially when the midfield is as deep as our midfield is. I think it wouldn't be such an issue if the entire team was 30 yards further forward for the majority of the game. I think that becomes less of an issue. And I think that's the biggest issue for everyone. Saka is infinitely better if the whole team is 30 yards further forward. Foden the same, Bellingham the same, Kane the same. So I think all of it ties into the fact that we're just sat far, far too deep for the majority of these players to thrive. And yeah, Trent in midfield is one of the players that suffers from that.
You're spot on, actually, Dan. Because one of the things about a right back is that you always get the ball facing forward, always seeing the whole pitch. Nobody's behind you. While in the midfield, that's why Toni Kroos is elite, for example. Rodri, they receive the ball knowing that there's a pressure coming, so they create angles for themselves to be able to scan and see the pitch. Trent probably has the football ability to distribute, to play the long passing and all the stuff, but he doesn't have the ability to receive the ball. He's not good at it, especially in the midfield when you have a whole team behind you that is trying to press you and prevent you from getting the ball.
And like half the amount of time as he would at right back as well. Because like I feel like the pressure, sometimes teams will use right and left back as an area to sort of not have a press in those areas sometimes. I feel like Trent probably got a lot more time out towards the side of the pitch rather than...
You coach football or play football?
Yeah.
Okay. Because normally that's exactly what people always say. When we did all the football when I was coached and stuff, always the fullback is the free guy. Always. That's what people say. Nobody presses the fullback unless the whole team is pressing. So it's different. I thought Trent can do it, to be honest with you guys. I think Trent's ability would have been able to play him in the midfield. Apparently he can't.
It's not his fault, by the way. Like, he just doesn't have that skill set. It's not an issue. You just need to, if you are going to play Trent, you need to do like what City have done with De Bruyne, where you play him outside the block rather than within it. You need to get him to positions where he's able to thrive, rather than asking him to be like, I don't know, Rodri or something at times, like when he's like receiving with his back to play. That's not his shtick. That's not his skill set. So it's not his fault. It's Southgate's fault for putting him there.
I agree, Nobbins. I think you're bang on with that. If you wanted Trent to be successful in this role at this tournament, the experiment has to start when you first introduce Trent to the team. We're talking like 4 or 5 years ago, not now, and expect it to work.
Even one of the biggest threats I think Trent would have, we've taken away anyway, because from the position that he sits in a lot of the time, one of the biggest things that he would be threatening with is the long diagonal ball. Yeah. We don't have a left winger to run onto it, and we don't have an overlapping left fullback to run onto it. So we've stripped one of the most potent weapons he'd had. Even if we are sitting in deep, that's one of the most effective things he could do, and we've not even offered him that. So other than playing it through to Saka, really, or crossing the ball in when we're further up the pitch, like, again, it's a failed experiment. Basically.
And just to touch on what you're saying as well, Rory, is Saka is probably our most direct in-behind runner, right? So Trent's crossfield pass is never targeted towards Saka's side anyway. There was a couple of times he played it down the line and it kind of worked. And I think maybe even the assist came from one of Trent's passes. I'm not sure. But when I've been watching Germany, Toni Kroos is drifting out to the left-hand side. Kimmich is one of their most advanced runners. That switches on every single time. So the only way I feel like Trent was ever going to work in midfield, to his absolute skill set as well, is to swap sides with Rice at the same time. And I just feel like it's just completely mismanaged by Southgate, this whole situation. And if you look at, like, with Toni Kroos and Trent in midfield are a completely different level, obviously. But the role that we wanted to see from Trent was that kind of Toni Kroos dictator role, drop off to the side, pick up the ball there short, receive it, and obviously cover a lot of ground with one pass. And I just not seen it work at all. So yeah, experiment failed for me.
Yeah, I think the problem is that he didn't take a left wing back. One of the
They didn't
problems,
take-
he didn't
they
take
didn't
wing
take-
backs at all.
Yeah, but even players that are left-sided haven't even been given a chance to play in that role either. Like you've given Foden, who isn't renowned for keeping width in a left-sided position. He's going to drift inside.
I'm talking about a left wing back, someone that can play a wing back.
Well, he took him, didn't he? But he's not fit.
Yeah, Chilwell, the one.
Chilwell basically failed the audition, didn't he? Let's be real. He had such an awful performance the last time he got called up to England. I think he lost his place there and then. But for me, not taking someone like even a Tyreek Mitchell when you know that Luke Shaw's
but the problem is Mitchell is the left back.
Yeah, but you know
a left
what?
wing back. I mean, someone like DeMarco for Inter. You know what I mean?
I hear you on
left
that,
wing back.
And I think the three at the back system worked really, really well in 2018 and even in Germany at the Euros. Someone like Ashley Young obviously enabled Southgate to do that for a certain period of time, didn't he? And I think back in 2018.
A wing back means someone that can defend.
But who?
I don't know. You tell me.
Alfie Doughty is the closest.
Is the closest to a left wing back.
It's Chilwell or him. Like
Chilwell is the only one that played that role under Tuchel numerous times. Chilwell.
I'd rather have Tuchel. I'd rather have Chilwell playing than Kieran Trippier right now because if Foden's in left wing, because I feel like we're completely limited on that left hand side. And as woeful as Chilwell was the last time he played for England, I'd rather someone be functional and balanced than someone be imbalanced to the team.
I don't know who is right wing. The problem is in England there is no top team that plays three at the back to get a top right wing back.
It's Reece James. It's Reece James.
Yes.
If you're looking for a right wing back, it is Reece James, and there's no conversation to anyone else in that role.
Yeah.
Also, if we'd gone into the tournament playing five at the back, everyone would have been raging that we were playing at five at the back when we have so much attacking talent. So it wouldn't have gone down well anyway.
I agree, because actually, if you look at the way Switzerland played in the five at the back last night, it's a completely different five at the back to what Southgate would have been fronting up as well.
Yeah.
But they're very pragmatic. They're very on the attackers' toes. They frustrated Germany. They frustrated Wirtz, Gundogan, Musiala. Whereas I think if it was Southgate and we were playing five at the back, we'd be very passive. We'd be allowing all those players to have a lot of time on the ball. Rice, Conor Gallagher, Trent, whoever it is in midfield would be exhausted. They'd be doing an absolute shift in there. They wouldn't be getting any help from their centre-backs. It'd be very limited defensively. And I feel like Southgate is just the absolute curse to this England team with the talent that it's got. And he's definitely a tournament too far for me.
Yeah. Listen, guys, we want to move on from this 570 people here, and we aren't even on 300 likes. The like button is underneath the live. It helps the show move to the next viewer and helps the channel massively. We actually reached 22K yesterday, and we're on the way to 22K 100. So thank you for everybody subscribed. Thank you for everybody that helped the channel. It's by your likes, shares, and subscriptions. So guys, come on, hit that like button. Get us to 300 likes. It's underneath. It looks like thumbs up. Some people just don't know. And Muhammad here is saying Bayern President Romaniga used to play for Inter, yes, which is why Inter and Bayern have a fantastic relationship. Any thoughts about Hakan leaving? He hasn't denied that yet, Muhammad. But I don't think he is keen that much to leave. Like, he doesn't mind leaving, but I don't think he will leave, to be honest, unless Bayern offer Inter about like 50 million euros or something like that, because he's 30 years old, basically. So if they offer that much money, Inter will sell him and will try to get somebody else. You know, I don't want him to go. But yeah, he can go to Bayern, him and Palhinha. That means Kimmich is going to leave. Goretzka is going to leave.
He just wants to follow in Hamet Altentop's footsteps now. Go to Bayern.
He's 30 years old. He's too old for that, you know? He's too old for that. But listen, people, moving on from this, I wanted to touch on that PSR thing and the Olise thing going to Bayern Munich. There are news today that he didn't go because of the finances. But do we believe that PSR is actually gonna drive talent out at all? We had this discussion earlier with other group. Do we think that at all? No. But why Man City? Man City aren't. So basically, Man City now aren't signing players. Chelsea are saying, okay, the PSR. Everton, Aston Villa, and Newcastle, Chelsea are literally doing deals with each other to comply with that PSR thing, right? And that might drive talent out of the Premier League. If you can't afford the talent because you are limited with your spending to that limit, I'm not saying don't have any limits. That will drive talent out, wouldn't it?
I've not seen any. I've not seen any evidence that that's going to happen yet, other than people saying that Olise wouldn't have gone to Bayern. When I'm almost certain, if Olise was presented simply with the options of Chelsea, United, or Bayern, he would have picked Bayern.
Yeah,
so,
I definitely agree with that. By the way,
so the whole thing with them selling players to themselves. I mean, are they talents that are, Dobbin? Is that a talent? Irubenum, is that a talent? Like, these are standard academy players that are being thrown around. And by the way, if let's say people are right and talent is going to start going elsewhere in Europe, that's a good thing for European football. Because one of the biggest issues that I think was, well, it's already happening, but was certainly going to get worse and worse, is that the Premier League becomes the Super League and that we hoard all of the talent because we can afford to do it. So, look, if some talent starts going back to Europe, then that's not even a bad thing, even though I just don't think PSR is going to cause that anyway.
I think the real issue with it that I can potentially see is the likes of the players that left for Saudi Arabia. The Premier League won't be able to stand in a position to even offer competitive wages to them. And obviously, they could, in some clubs' cases, offer some sort of competitive wage compared to like what a Saudi Pro League team might be able to offer. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's more of a hypothetical stance that it could affect us, like as a Premier League and a product. Their own profit and sustainability rules have kind of hindered the league a little bit in terms of who they've been able to keep in as talent, because we lost a lot last summer and obviously players wanted to go to Saudi Arabia and try it, but when you lose the likes of Mane, Harry Kane, Mahrez, Firmino, like, it's a lot of talent to just suddenly disappear from the league.
Yeah,
I don't know enough about whether it will like drive talent out, because it's obviously probably too early to tell. But I do think that clearly with the whole, one club rubbing another club's back in respect of the youth, the youth player situation, there's clearly a problem. I'm not saying there's a problem in doing that, because as I understand it, that's not in breach of the rules. But that's clearly a symptom of a wider issue if clubs are feeling the need to do that. If academy players, I don't know what they're called, I can't remember, are being treated as basically,
assets. Assets.
Yeah, and just like, for free money from because if you sell an academy player, that counts as pure profit from an accounting perspective. That's why Chelsea were fined to sell Mount. That's why they have wanted to try to offload Gallagher, for example, because that counts as pure profit from an accounting perspective. I don't have an issue with clubs doing that, but there's clearly an issue if youth players are being viewed as that, rather than what I would hope would be the idea of having a youth player, which is you want to try to get them into your first team at some point. But what's the incentive now? So PSR, FFP, whatever, does clearly need a rethink. The rules aren't fit for purpose as things stand, clearly. I don't know what the solution is, but it clearly does need a revamp, because there are many issues. This is one of the many issues that we've been experiencing over the years. We could do a whole separate stream, about the whole, enhancing the status quo and that sort of thing, denying, making it harder for external investment to take place, etc., which is a good thing for the league. So yeah, it does need a total rethink. I don't know what the solution is, but clearly one needs to be identified.
Yeah, and they obviously... Go on, Rory.
No, you go.
Oh, I was only just going to add to it and just say that they obviously put in these rules to obviously make clubs produce their own homegrown talent to generate profit and things like that. And it's just completely being used against it by, instead of driving players to development to generate profit, they're now feeling like they have to sell these players as the way to balance the books for overspending on foreign import. It's just ridiculous. It's just not worked at all. It needs a whole revamp.
I think the concerning thing is that people think that Everton and Villa and Newcastle and Chelsea, whatever, selling to players between themselves to make that pure profit now, and then they amortize the player that they buy from the other club, so that they're going to make the profit now. But it's like people haven't realised they're kicking the can down the road so that they can pass it this year. That means, for example, Chelsea, assuming that you bring in Kellyman for 20 million and then amortize it. I think his contract's only 3 years, right?
Yeah, probably. So what we look at 7-8 million.
Yeah, so you look at it. Okay, so 6.5 million this year. But that means next year, at the start of next year, you're spending 6.5 million straight off the bat. And obviously, you've got so many players on your
so many, yeah. We're what Chelsea are probably. Let's be realistic. Chelsea are probably up to 100 million a year for the next 7 years, guaranteed right now.
And even players like Kellyman, who in reality is probably never going to get anywhere near your squad. That's 6.5 million next year and the year after. So it's like, I feel like these aren't really solving problems. They're just delaying what is the inevitable in certain cases, which is if you've spent money really irresponsibly, it's going to catch up to you at some point.
They're trying to kick the can so far down the road that the rules get changed and then they're unaffected. That's what they're trying to do. Especially people like Clearlake, who are rebels in the sense that they're trying to find every single loophole. They've been trying to change and move the goalposts ever since they got in position. The same with like Manchester City asking to check the Premier League like that. What are you saying? No one's, you'll clear it up, I'm sure, but suggesting that the Premier League's rules are unfair and potentially suing them for it because they shouldn't actually be allowed to be in place. These clubs are just trying to basically bully the Premier League into changing their rules and regulations and move them so that by the time they have to deal with the problem, it's not a problem anymore. That's basically it. So I agree. And to be honest, it's almost embarrassing for the player being used as the mate weight in the deal. Someone like Kellerman is obviously nowhere near that amount of money.
What I want to understand, these new names that popped up, I had never heard of these names before like 2 days ago.
You wouldn't unless you were like an Aston Villa Premier League 2 watcher avidly, I'm sure.
Exactly. This was never when I've been watching the Premier League for over 20 years, right? Over 20 years. Always following the transfers, looking at all the clubs. I've never heard these stories before. Like I've never sat on news hearing about a 16, 18 years old being a hit and all the stuff until this Chelsea problem happens and you spend, to be honest, and it's not a dig at Chelsea, until Chelsea spend this £1 billion in a year or two with all the sellings and stuff, and the wage cap at Chelsea being right behind Man City. We've never heard of these transfers about a kid that moves from this to that. Like Ahmed Suleiman down in the chat. It's tweeted, this Kellyman signed 6 years. Who is this guy? I guarantee you, we'll never see this guy play for Chelsea Football Club. We might not never see this guy wear a first-team shirt for Chelsea and be on the pitch. We might never see that happen. Never. But we are talking about it because of this. Oh, Chelsea needs to find loopholes. It's legal. Oh, they're finding this. It's legal. But that was never the case. It was never the case like this. And it's, to be honest, like, I'm looking at it. There has to be something wrong here. There has to.
It wasn't the case, Mo, to the amounts that we're talking about. Chelsea have often signed players in make weights for deals like this, like for a long time. I remember quite a few players coming in, but the fees haven't been anywhere near as excessive as what they currently are. I think that's the thing, isn't it? 20 million is eye-opening.
Alice, go ahead, Rory. By the time I find this,
I think the reality is, I don't think the Premier League. Look. There have always been clubs, owners, etc., that have tried to find loopholes and stuff. But I don't think the Premier League's ever had to deal with this level of effectively clubs actively wanting to do everything in their power to find loopholes in part of the game that, as fans, we're not overly interested in. I think we're at a new level of really trying to find any single way to it's like they kind of want to get one over on the Premier League. I feel like, Chelsea are a significant factor of that. I feel like they came in very bullish, had this kind of wild plan that had never been seen before in terms of spending all of that money. And instead of letting that plan die, they're now doing everything in their power. And look, would it surprise you if it was Chelsea that had contacted Villa and Newcastle and Everton and said, well, by the way, this is how we can all get around it? If they were the ringleaders of that, wouldn't surprise me. I don't know that for certain, but I do think I think the Premier League is struggling to deal with that at the moment.
Yeah.
And no, go on. I'm done.
No, listen, Alice, you guys know Alice, the one that talks about Man United. I like her views. She's very like objective sometimes. She's someone, but she actually put all of them together, all the transfers. And when you hear them together, you see what's going on. She literally tweeted, she said, Chelsea sell Maatsen to Villa, but Chelsea buy Kellerman off Villa for 20 million, despite his valuation being 1 million, right? That plus 150, he has 150 minutes of professional football. Villa signed Dobbin from Everton for 10 million, and his valuation is 2 million. Then Everton buys someone from Villa that I can't pronounce his name, Tim whatever, for 9 million, despite his valuation being 4 million. And Newcastle are attempting the same deals with Everton for someone called Minta and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And it looks like exactly like what Rory's saying. These guys got together and said, we're just going to try to fight this by literally doing deals with each other, put them on 5 years so they won't be on the books. And
the other thing that the Premier League's never really had to deal with is having multiple teams in the same situation. If you just have one team that's struggling with PSR, they're not going to find another team that will do that deal with them, right? Because they go, well, we don't need to do that. Now that they have multiple, realistically big teams in Chelsea, you know, this isn't like if it was respectfully Luton or someone that was dealing with this. It's Chelsea, Newcastle, Everton, Villa. These are big clubs with now big owners, powerful owners. And that, I think, the Premier League have a real power struggle on their hands. And I think it's only going to get worse as well in terms of the amount of bullshit we're going to have to talk about, the legal stuff, things going through court, this, that, and the other. And I think it's a weird situation to be in as fans.
But do you know what is this going to do, Rory? And do you remember when everyone in the world complained about Neymar 220 million and Kylian Mbappe from Monaco to Paris and said you inflated the market? And people at that time, if I remember what happened correctly at that time, people wanted an independent whatever to actually do the valuation for players. So people should not inflate players. Well, the Premier League said that clubs cannot sell players to Saudi Arabia and loan them back to the Premier League. There was a rule that was going to be introduced like that, right? Now, what these clubs are going to do if they keep doing this is that the other clubs are going to say, hold on, we need to have a rule, right, to prevent inflating players' values, because now clubs going to form packs together and work with each other to help each other financially while we're sitting here. And now we'll bring it to the other side, or the other clubs are going to, but it's not illegal. We're doing this legally. I'm like, yeah, but you're inflating the market. You're literally finding loopholes. Loopholes are not illegal, but it doesn't mean they are right, by the way. You selling a player to your friend for double or triple his price, it might not be illegal, but now Man City has all the right to say, well, I need my cousin to sponsor me for 200 million now. Like, if we're going to allow this, we cannot be sitting here, and now I'm defending Man City. We cannot be sitting here
crazy
saying that Man City, their cousin in Emirates, cannot sponsor them for 200 million, because these clubs legally doing exactly the same, but on a smaller scale. You are literally putting on your books, the player is valued 1 million. You're putting 19 million on your books, right? Which is 20 times more. So that's what, like 2,000% or something like that? 2,000% on your books from the value that you should be getting legally. No, it's not illegal. But okay, Man City can do the same. What Sheikh Mansour's cousin wants to sponsor him for 100 million, but because it's 100 million, it's illegal. And because this is 20 million only. Basically now, but this thought just came to my mind now, actually, when you guys spoke about the inflation and stuff like this. So how can we blame Man City for, okay, we're doing it illegally, my cousin wants to sponsor me? Someone has to stop this, because this is borderline playing the rules like what Man City did. Because what Man City do, okay, my cousin, it's not me sponsoring thing, it's my cousin in Emirates sponsoring me. Saudi Arabia the same. Do you see the situation here?
Yeah, but it's about whether City did break rules, though, right? Rather than loopholes, if there were actual rules that were broken, and that's what we're going to find.
Yeah, but Rory, City are actually saying, so this is the lawsuit. City are saying, oh, this law is actually illegal. So they're trying to fight that law. They're trying to say that law is illegal, because I don't see any difference between Everton and Newcastle and Aston Villa Chelsea doing deals together to inflate players' prices than Man City getting sponsors.
Yeah, but Mo,
It's literally look the same, guys. By the way,
do you not kind of? The only thing I'll say is, do you not think that fighting a law means that you've done wrong by that law, and the only way to get away with it is by removing the law?
no, but that's not why they're fighting the law.
Because that's what I feel like.
What I understood from Martin and LB when I spoke to them is that City had a deal rejected. That's why they're fighting the law. They are actually fighting the law because they had losses. Does that make sense? It's not that they broke that law and they are trying to fight it. They say that you made us, we lost a deal because of that law, so we're gonna fight that law. Am I wrong, Nobbins?
No, yeah. So we have, as I understand it, you know, for example, with the whole 115 situation, that's not related to associated party transactions.
Yes.
When the rule came out in 2021, City said at the time, just to let you know, if you keep introducing regulations and restrictions, then we will challenge this legally. And I think this is what we're sort of seeing now in terms of like, someone saying, why are we seeing it? Why are we seeing all of these clubs, and now doing all this at once? And it's because every year upon year upon year upon year, the Premier League is adding more and more and more rules and regulations and restrictions, and it's creating a monster which clearly it's not in control of anymore, and clubs are deciding to go around those rules or use those rules cleverly or whatever. So the solution is twofold. You can either, because in order to prevent this, you could introduce, because I think the Premier League currently have a rule where if there's a transfer between a club which is associated to another club, then the fair value thing will be applied.
Yes.
But they don't have one for all transfers. So the solution is to either implement one of those and introduce more regulations and restrictions and basically create like a price cap market. I don't know how I feel about that. Who decides
evaluation,
who's what.
Basically, Nobbins. Also, evaluation, an evaluation method.
Exactly, and then that introduces all sorts of questions of, well, for example, I think a totally different subject. I personally think Bruno Guimaraes is worth £100 million to City, but you don't, and then it becomes a totally subjective thing, and then there's a massive conversation there. So you go down that route and introduce more regulations and restrictions, or you have a total revamp and a total rethink. And I think that maybe the latter is probably for the better of the sports in general, because if we keep going down this route, it's just going to further solidify the top sides, like City now, for example, obviously Arsenal, Liverpool, etc., and it's going to make it harder for ambitious clubs to fulfill that ambition. I personally don't think that's fair.
That's the constant game of cat and mouse, though, isn't it? And that's what it's always been. It's the rules are there, and the Premier League hopes that everyone kind of, even from a moral perspective, abides by those rules. Even if they see a loophole, they don't use it because they're good faith actors. But then you get owners that come in that aren't good faith actors, so they find the loophole. So then the Premier League has to implement new rules to block that loophole. And it's this constant spiral, which is getting quicker and quicker and quicker because you've got more rich, big owners that are trying to find more and more ways of getting around those rules. So the Premier League has it's a constant spiral, and I don't know when it will ever end. The issue
Rory,
is,
wouldn't you want that to happen? Okay, so for example, would you blame Everton, Aston Villa, and Chelsea before you go on for trying to survive instead of being punished and having point deduction, or would you blame the Premier League for having this? Would you want your club to do the same deals if you were in financial trouble?
Well, so this is the thing. Arsenal bent over backwards for years and years and years to avoid breaking PSR rules, right? So for years and years and years, we were selling our best players and bringing in lower quality players because we'd built a stadium and we couldn't afford to keep up with those players. So we lost players. So Arsenal bent over backwards. And this is why I don't have sympathy for Villa, Chelsea, Newcastle, because ultimately they're sat there now saying, oh, we have to do these PSR deals to comply. You're forcing us to do this to comply. It's like, no, you just didn't need to make the loss in the first place. Like you made a series of bad decisions in the first place, which means as it stands, you're about to breach those rules. If you hadn't made those choices, like everyone else, you wouldn't need to do this. So it's like they're sitting there going, well, you forced us to break the rule. So now we're just doing what we can to for me.
But then how do teams break through that glass ceiling?
There is no glass ceiling.
Pardon?
There is no glass ceiling.
Well, there is, because a club's ambition is limited by their revenue.
Only short term. You get to a point, you sustain yourself there, you build up the revenue, you go to the next point. It's only the clubs that want to go from, for example, Villa being in the Championship, 6 years ago, to wanting to now be competing for the Champions League.
Name one example in Premier League history where that's happened.
Where what's happened?
Where a club which is not one of the established elites, without external investment, and through doing it slowly and steadily and surely, has now established itself as one of the main elite clubs.
Well, even from way back in the day. I think Tottenham have done it.
Yeah, Tottenham is probably the closest to that. I would actually.
What do they have to show for it?
Well, they don't. That's
man, now you are twisting the words.
Not really, because again, Tottenham haven't broken through a glass ceiling at all.
They have.
They might have broken through their own glass ceiling, though, Nobbins.
We get
their own, sure, but not in respect to the Premier League status quo. The only two clubs they are not a United or a Liverpool or an Arsenal. They are Spurs.
Nobbins, I'm sorry. We sit on shows with Spurs fans because of what happened over the past 10, 12 years for Spurs when they consistently made Champions League. They made a Champions League final. They finished in the top 4. They finished second twice. This is why Spurs have fans in America. Spurs started attracting foreign people from America, from Asia, from everywhere.
Yeah, from Asia massively as well.
Yeah, and from America as well. You remember Patrick Dempsey and all these guys that played for them. This is what Spurs did. And as of now, they sit at a top 6 club. Yes, they haven't won a trophy, but they were very close of winning it. They are part of the big 6 through that route.
Yeah, again, Spurs were never first of all, Spurs were never a tiny club. And again, they have not broken through to be the level of United, Arsenal, Liverpool in respect of winning things. The only sides that have done that are City and Chelsea.
So let's look at it the other way then, Nobbins, in terms of what you'd want, where you effectively want uncapped external investment.
Whoa! That's not what I've said at all.
Well, it sounds like. What do you want then? Because you want clubs to have the ability to see through their ambition to break through to the very top, right?
Yeah, club.
But not every club can do that.
But why?
Well, because there's one league winner every year. So unless you want a...
But why? Like, my main gripe is, why can't clubs dream? So, for example, like Ipswich, why can't... Or no, let's say a current side. Why can't Crystal Palace, for example, have like a 5-year plan where they go, right, in 5 years' time we want to win the Premier League?
Because Saudi Arabia currently own a football club in the Premier League. At that point, who is going to come in and compete with Saudi Arabia as an owner financially? And then who competes with the second richest? It becomes... And you could very easily see a situation where the richest people in the world buy clubs, and no offense to them, but buy clubs like Burnley and, I don't know, Sheffield United, and clubs like this. And within 5 years, clubs like Arsenal, Liverpool, United can't even compete with them anywhere near financially. And the biggest clubs in the country effectively disappear. And you've just got random clubs popping up left, right, and centre that go and buy all of the best talent and become top. And you say, "Oh well, credit to them. They fulfilled
I'm not saying unlimited. I'm not saying unlimited. No restrictions. I think that's silly. There clearly need to be some restrictions. But what I am saying is the current rules in place are such that it is impossible to compete without that significant external investment. And now we're in a situation where the ladder's been pulled up. Like,
so,
if we, sorry, go on.
No, go on. You haven't finished.
I was just going to say, so if we like. So, for example, if we took out the clubs which, benefited from significant external investment in order to go from whatever they were to a Premier League winner, then you'd be left in a situation. If we like eradicated that, then we'd be left in a situation where we'd only have like 3 Premier League winners, and there'd be Arsenal, United, and Liverpool. I don't think that's good for the state of English football, personally. Because you take out Blackburn in '95, you obviously take out Chelsea and Abramovich, you take out City and Sheikh Mansour, you'd even take out Leicester's title win because they spent over £100 million from 2010 onwards, which is a lot of money at the time. And I don't think that's a positive landscape for English football to only have 3 different winners. So clearly there needs to be a rethink. Do you not consider that to be a thing?
I completely agree with that, Nobbins, by the way. I think there wouldn't be an issue for me. That I feel like, no disrespect to Manchester City, but obviously Arsenal and Liverpool challenging them has been refreshing, but the challenge hasn't been able to sustain itself for a long enough period of time, probably because of their like limited investment, probably because of PSR rules or something along those lines to actually compete and build a squad that is as good as City's that you've built over a long period of time. However, if Newcastle were to challenge next season, it would make the Premier League a far more exciting league, adding another team to the mix. And I think this is where you're right, is that how do you go about doing that in a fair way rather than in a way that is loopholes that puts the game into disrepute? Like that's
I
the
have
issue
the
I
answer,
have.
by the way.
It's
The new rule. The answer is very simple.
A cap, like a spending
Cap
cap.
for everyone.
Yeah, so
similar.
everyone is set at like 250
However,
every year.
universal cap.
However, you need to be able to have a way of protecting the club from going bankrupt. For example, I'm just going to give you an example. Luton, so Everton, by the way, Everton might have gone bankrupt if they got relegated because of the new stadium, because of spending, right? My point about this is very simple. If you're an owner and you're coming to a club, right? This is LB, I think, presented something like this before. If you're coming to the club and you want to invest as much as Arsenal, you should be allowed to, right? If you want to, as long as you have a fund on the side to protect the club if this owner leaves, to keep the club running. So basically, if you want to spend the 500 million that Arsenal spend, go ahead, do it. But have a 500 million on the side, right? To be able, if you go bankrupt or you screw up, to be able for the Premier League or for someone to run this, pay the wages and keep everyone employed. That is the solution. That means if an owner like Manchester City buys Luton, they can go and say, I'm going to spend as much as Man United. I'm going to put money on the side because I think if I spend as Man United, I'll be able to compete with Man United within 5 years. They should be allowed to do that. It's up to them to invest their money in the club or not, as long as Man United as well are allowed to spend that much money. This is what the cap is. The new cap is doing this. The new cap is saying the smallest club 3 times you can spend that much. All of us can spend that much.
It's an anchor, right? So it is still related. It's related actually to the bottom club, not to the top. So
it's also still connected to revenue, though, is the main issue. So again, you'll still be in a situation where the big clubs can spend a hell of a lot more than the smaller ones.
No, it's not. It's revenue of one club, but the measuring stick is one club.
That's for the anchoring, but the general rules are still related to revenue. I'm very confident in that. Pretty sure.
The anchoring, if anything,
I'm pretty sure.
The anchoring, if anything, is even tighter on the top clubs because the top clubs will be spending less in the future than they do now if it's anchored to the bottom team in the Premier League. Factually, they'll be spending far less, especially on wages. So that is actually more of a that's more of a thing on the top clubs than we even have now. The issue is if you just put a cap in where you say, okay, if you can put a pot aside and you can spend up to 500 million a year every year. Okay, so you'll bring in a load of owners that will happily spend all of that money and make those massive losses. If you're a club that doesn't have that owner, you're just going to fall. A Crystal Palace, for example. The Crystal Palace owner will be forced to either sell to someone that could afford to do that or say goodbye to the Premier League, despite the fact that they've been here for years. Because you'll just find more and more owners that are willing to do that. I think everyone wants to look at the aspiration of getting to the top. No one wants to look at any other club that may have, Crystal Palace have done an incredible job to sustain their place in the Premier League for as long as they have with as little money as they have. They would just disappear if those sort of rules existed.
I'm not advocating for any club should be able to spend whatever they want. I don't agree with that because that would be bad for football. But there needs to be a compromise. We need to, again, the example that which I think was quite a good one was if you take out external investment entirely, you are left with 3 different winners, and then the Premier League becomes a Spanish league, which La Liga. I don't think a side which isn't Barca or Real Madrid or Atletico has won since Deportivo La Coruña in 2000 or something, which is mental and clearly that's the definition of a triopoly. Valencia. Apologies. Yes, Valencia. Apologies. In the early 2000s, wasn't it?
To happen.
So that was 20 years ago. Was it with Rafa at Valencia? Was that 2003-ish?
I think that would happen, but it would literally be as rare as that. Maybe 1 in 20 years, you'll get one anomaly where one of the most invested clubs doesn't win.
And I don't think that's fair. To be fair, for example, I'm not trying to have a go at United, but why should United be allowed to ride the coattails off what they achieved over a decade ago now? Why is that fair? Why is that a thing?
Because they've got a global fan base, and
because they've already built it, Nobbins, haven't they? They built that success 10 years ago.
But Man City, I'm sorry, but Man City are building it now.
Yeah,
well, they're not, because we still don't see those fans. But the flip side is, if Man City is the example of what happens when it is realistically, Man City's spending was not capped. It was meant to be, but it wasn't capped. So Man City effectively spent what they wanted for however many years, and now they've won 6 of the last 7 titles. So that's what happens when you have the richest team in the league that doesn't have cap spending, can spend what they want, and then they become the dominant team in the league. So we've seen what
I'm not advocating for no caps.
But I don't understand where you think drawing the line makes it fair. Because wherever you draw the line on what teams can spend, there will be teams below that. There'll be teams that could go beyond that line, which will still be saying, well, this isn't fair because we want to spend more. They'll still be trying to break whatever that cap is by whatever means necessary. And you'll have left a load of teams behind. Wherever you put that. If there are restrictions in place, by definition, teams are being restricted and therefore will complain that they're being restricted.
Again, so do you just remove all restrictions?
No.
No?
I think you make the restrictions tighter.
Right.
As in, not lower.
Isn't that
not
going to
lower.
only enhance the status quo even more, though?
No, because I'm not saying you make the restrictions lower. I'm saying you make them more waterproof in terms of finding loopholes to get through them. That's very difficult to do, admittedly. The Premier League is struggling, but it's difficult. It's difficult. Look, to be honest, the 4 of us sat here are not going to come up with the solution.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like, I don't know what the answer is, nor am I going to be able to think about it on a Monday afternoon on JUDGEMO's show. It's not going to happen. But hopefully we can surely agree with the concept that in theory it would surely be better for the league if before the start of I'm including City in this as well. Surely it would be better before the start of each season. We can just go, right, for example, next season, we know that it's either going to be City or Arsenal win the league. And there's not even like a question mark about that. It's going to be one of those two.
That's what Maresca wants to challenge.
Yeah, sure. Maybe like, wouldn't it be a better scenario where actually the league starts and that's like, oh, actually, and this I could do it, and this I could do it, and this I could do it. And you have that same pattern over the years. Wouldn't that be a healthier sport and a more competitive, interesting, entertaining one? Rather than, again, it's the same teams every single time.
But your assumption is that if you change the regulations, suddenly every team will just be able to compete and it won't just be the richest club. If you make the restrictions less tight, it's going to benefit the teams with the richest owners. And so it will just be those teams that it will just become City, Newcastle.
Again, not necessarily.
By the way, it won't be City. Let's just establish something. It will be only Newcastle.
Well, yeah, exactly.
The wealth difference between Emirates and Saudi Arabia is massive, by the way.
Again, I don't know what the solution is. Maybe you could total dream world. You could have like a draft thing, like in the NBA. I have no idea how that would work. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that there are clearly innumerable methods in which it could be achieved. I can't give you the answer, but all I'm saying is hopefully we can agree with the concept that it would be better for football in general if more than just a couple of teams a year were realistically going to be able to win the Premier League.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely.
I'm not advocating for one method or another. I'm just talking about a concept.
Surely
everyone gets to spend the same, as Travarelli said. This is it. Everyone gets to spend the same, which is why the UEFA president has said it. Salary cap.
And whoever spends better wins.
You wouldn't be able to do a salary cap because the players...
Exactly. Dan, this is it. Whoever is able, like for example, and I said this 50,000 times, let's say your cap of the wages is 200 million, right? Man City can go and say, Mbappe, we're going to bring you in. We're going to give you half the cap for you. And we're going to we're going to have 25 other players that are average to divide the rest. Arsenal can go like, no, I'm not signing Mbappe. I'm signing better 20 million a person squad. That is who spends it better.
Yeah, I think that'd be a much better concept to have it. So whoever spends it better, it benefits. For example, again, not having to go, but like, what punishment have United have for being poor at spending the last 10 years? They spent more than anyone else in the world. They're not a threat of being relegated. I don't think that's right.
Well, yeah, because they've spent badly and they're nowhere near winning titles.
But in the grand scheme of things, that's not a genuine punishment, is it? We all know United aren't going anywhere ever. We all know they're not getting. Oh, boo-hoo! They finished 7th. Like, that's not a punishment, is it? They're going to spend
Well,
more money in the future, and then they're just going
they
to
earn
keep
more
doing
money.
it because
They earn more. They're obviously going to spend more money because they earn more money.
They
Right,
have more
and-
money to waste, though, don't they? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And again, why do they earn so much money?
Because they're the biggest club in the world.
Because and why is that?
Because of their
Because they have the
previous
biggest
success.
history.
And
Exactly. So it's based on something which originated in the early 20th century.
But if there's no point building a club's history, then what's the point in any of it? All like, what if we're not building history? What are we doing? There's no point.
Nobbins, you're shooting yourself in the foot here.
If history is irrelevant, why would we care about winning trophies?
I'm not saying history is irrelevant. What I am saying is that a club in the modern day shouldn't be able to purely ride off the coattails of something that was achieved over a century ago.
So if Elon Musk just starts bloody X the football team and comes and starts from scratch and invests a shitload of money and comes to the top, you'd be happy with that?
It's not a case of being happy, because again, I don't think that no restrictions is a good thing.
So you acknowledge that history does matter?
I never said it didn't.
I think if a club the size of Manchester United has achieved what it's achieved for the period of time that it has, and it's done it for literally over 100 years now, why can't they, if they've been at the top of the game and the most respected club in the country for such a long period of time, why can't they spend that money? They're a globally recognized brand.
But they haven't.
What?
But they haven't.
What do you mean they haven't?
The majority of Man United's history is between 92 and now.
United went from a period after 1969.
Hold on. Then let me just stop. Sorry, Nobbins, I apologize. By the way, Man United were a big club, massive club. The Bobby Charlton, they had the World Cup winners in '66. But the majority of the fan base were created between 92 and now. And 2012. Well, Chelsea fan base
broadcast to a wider audience.
Exactly.
By sports.
So why are Man United upset that Chelsea just were 10 years later instead of 92, 2003? From 2003 until 2023, Chelsea are more successful than anyone else. But Man United fans say that Chelsea, oh, you don't have any history. I'm just here defending Chelsea. Chelsea don't have any history. Well, Man United, the majority, the biggest as part of your success and building your fan base, the global one, is 20 years. So has Chelsea. So has Man City now at the current moment. So has Arsenal, by the way, since Arsene Wenger came in. But Arsenal have it smaller. It's 10 years. It's old. It's from 96 to 2006 when they reached the Champions League final, right? But Man United, every time I sit with Man United fans, they tell me, but we have the biggest history. No, Liverpool have the biggest history because Liverpool were dominant before you in the 80s. Liverpool were dominant domestically and internationally in the 80s.
But yeah, because history is about, even in periods where teams weren't winning, they were still creating history and creating that. For example, you could argue that Man City's period of success now has been just as long as Arsenal's period of success, late 90s, early 2000s, and yet we have a far bigger global fan base than Man City do. So that when access to the world on TV and stuff has been even greater during Man City's era of dominance, and they've had an era of success more substantial than Arsenal's era of success, that still hasn't given them the global fan base that Arsenal have. Because history is, whilst you will have periods where you grow much more than other periods, it's so much like it's generational. It's generation after generation.
Can I counter that? All right. Simply, I see more Man City fans, kids in America than I see Arsenal or Manchester United. When I go to the mosque, academies here, young academies, you'll see a lot of kids wearing Man City shirts. Why? Because they're the winning team, which is what Arsenal were in the 90s with the Bergkamps and the Henrys, and of course the Africa with Kanu and all this stuff. So I actually argue that 10 years from now or 15 years from now, if Man City keep winning, the fan base of Man City for that generation will be bigger than Man United, that young generation.
Yeah, that is true.
By the way, that's logically speaking, which is why, by the way, Chelsea 20 years ago, their fan base were like this. In Africa now, they're massive. There's a lot of Chelsea because of Essien, because of a lot of like the Drogba. You know what I mean? So I can do the same thing for Chelsea. Yes, their fan base is shorter time, but we just waited 10 years. We see people in Asia, in America, lots of Chelsea fans. Why? They built it. Let's wait for the next generation. The next generation might be more City fans than Man United and Arsenal. Is that logical to say that or no?
Kind of, but I get in the UK, I just still don't see kids wearing City tops.
But the UK is not the world.
I'll be honest. When I was coaching and
Yeah.
they first come onto the scene and were winning stuff, I couldn't believe how many City kits I saw.
But do you
Can
still
I tell
see?
you
'Cause I just
something
don't
else,
see
Dan?
them.
Can I tell you something else?
I would
Why
say
there's
I
a
don't go
lot of
around
Man
looking.
United fans in London, Rory? Why do you think there's tons of Londoners that are Man United fans? Why? Tons, thousands and thousands.
Because
Man
of how
United fans.
successful United were, but
So
also
what-
because of in the UK the way that people move around the country. So you can very comfortably have generations.
No,
of
I'm
United
talking about the
fans, not
Londoners that
people
grew, born and bred in London. There is a lot of Man United fans. Tons of them.
because United were successful.
So why not City young kids in London
No,
now?
I'm not saying I'm not saying there will be none of them, but it just, for me, from what I observe, it feels different. I go home to where there are no Premier League teams anywhere near that area, which is why I'm an Arsenal fan. And when I go back there, I still just don't see people in City tops. I still see people in United tops, in Liverpool tops, in Arsenal tops, Chelsea tops.
And I think this is the
But
thing.
we have Chelsea as an example, as Dan said. Chelsea themselves are the example of why the logic will logic in 10 years.
Kind of, Mo, but it's almost directed as to like once the issue is that once like a family has a team, it's very difficult for the team to sort of part from that. Whereas football in America is relatively still taking off to huge new limits where it's probably like exposing itself to the whole country. So that's why a lot of people don't have allegiances or loyalties towards teams. Probably where I'm not saying it's the case, but probably a lot of African people didn't have an allegiance to a Premier League side. And then Chelsea had all these African stars and they felt an attachment to Chelsea. Is it the same that now Manchester City have marketed themselves really well in America? Do Americans now feel more of an attachment to them as they're the winning side? They've been marketed well in America. They've obviously done like the collab with FaZe Clan and things like that, who are huge. Like, is that the sort of reason why? So is it that Manchester City will blow up in one part of the world more?
So you're telling me that it was just lucky that TV, the global broadcast, came in the 90s and 2000s, and families will force their kids to support the clubs they supported while they had a choice because there was no broadcasting. By the way, that point proves one thing, proves Nobin's point. So the history then, what's the history done with this? It's all about luck.
I personally, I don't. If my argument came across that we should disregard history, that's not what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say was, basically, if you were really good 20 years ago, for example, I don't think that gives you an inherent right to be good now. The example I was going to give earlier was United in the late 60s were obviously brilliant. Won the European Cup in 1968. They then did not win a league title or a European Cup for 25 years. And in that time, they got relegated. And yet, in the late 80s, United had the most expensively assembled squad in world football. Now, I don't think that's fair that they were just like allowed to do. And you say, well, they were allowed to do it because they were once good once upon a time. And that squad then ultimately led to the advent of the Premier League, which subsequently led to them being so dominant in that period. I just fundamentally don't think that just because you were good a long time ago means that you deserve to be good now. This is why I'm talking about we need a system which doesn't just secure the current top clubs, and there needs to be avenues for lesser clubs to be able to enter that field.
Yeah. Let me do the super chats before we move on, before we end. I wanted to speak a little bit about the transfers because every time we say we're going to speak about them, we don't. Big up Ashraf. Thank you so much. Ashraf Habibi supporting from Emirates. Appreciate you supporting the channel. Big up Mo. Keep up the good work. Here is to more and more success. Hopefully, of course, with the guys. Of course, guys, remember, Rory's channel, 6:30, you're live today.
Yes,
6:30.
yes.
Nobin's in channels in the description as well. Dan's channel in the description. Make sure to go and subscribe to these guys, people, please, please, please. And Gauss Moara 9. Gauss Moara became a YouTube member. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. E-Ink is saying, I'm not in for FIFA price cap. Is the only way. FIFA price cap is one of the ways, but there has to be an independent regulators, and nobody's actually explained that you'll come to, okay, it's a subjective opinion about the price. Paulo Cesar is saying, don't you think that part of the reason that United, Liverpool, and Arsenal are partially because of the financial aid before their massive growth? Also, half or more of City's success is due to Pep. Nobody says that.
I don't understand what financial aid means. Sorry.
I don't
Does
know.
that mean
I guess he's saying that those clubs got big financial backing.
Of course it is. Yeah, United are a big club because, well, United were going to go out of business in the early 20th century until a rich consortium bought them and built Old Trafford, and they were known as Moneybags United. Yeah, of course. Like, it's every single, like Arsenal's nickname was, the Bank of England, for example. Every single club historically has required finances by rich men to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Guys, 700 people here while I do the super chat. Let's get to 300 likes. We're not on 300 likes yet, guys. Terence Danielson, big up. United have the global fan base to back up their spending after a good history. City have the money plus sponsors, but not the fans yet. How?
Well, first of all, we do have the fans. I believe that City are one of the most followed clubs in America. Secondly, I think this all goes down to the commercial income which City earns, because people go, well, how can you be earning so much? But yeah, it's a very simple explanation that there is only one club. Start again. The English league, Premier League, is the most lucrative league from a financial perspective. We all understand that. It's therefore the most lucrative for advertisers and sponsors. The Champions League, subsequently, is also very lucrative. And there is only one English club of the last decade which has qualified for the Champions League every single time and has got through to the knockout stages every single time. So if you are a brand and you need to guarantee, and you want to sponsor a Premier League side, and you want to guarantee that your brand image gets plastered in the latter stages of the Champions League, or just in the Champions League generally, your only safe bet in the last decade is City. And that's why that is the case. This is why OKX, a company which has no affiliation with Abu Dhabi, our City sleeve sponsor, by the way, that's why City sleeve sponsor is twice as much as Arsenal's in respect of value. It's not to do with shady dealings. It's to do with, look at it from the perspective of companies. Companies want their image to be branded in the bigger stages.
So you're saying, like, if you'd had a load of success over the last few years, you'd be qualifying for the Champions League, doing well in the Champions League every year, that would be more valued than a team that obviously hasn't.
That's how the financial world works, yes.
So in 2008, when you first got sponsored by Etihad, and the deal was worth more than Arsenal had got from the Emirates deal a couple of years earlier, despite the fact that Arsenal had been in a Champions League final, consistently qualifying for the Champions League, won multiple Premier Leagues, and City had done none of that and hadn't achieved anything, how did Etihad suddenly sponsor Man City for significantly more than Emirates sponsored Arsenal, or any other club had a sponsorship of that level?
Well, it wasn't just for one thing; it was for three. It was for the stadium naming rights.
The same thing.
It was for the shirt sponsor, and it was for the training ground as well. But what I would say is that point is moot, because UEFA have established that was put in for fair value. So you would have to have a conversation with them.
Right. So So everything that you said previously about how you come up with the value went out the window for Etihad.
Not really, because again, UEFA have said it was entered into for fair value.
Mm.
So you would, again, if you want to disagree with them, you'd have to speak to UEFA.
Okay, that's convenient, but okay.
It's not convenient that UEFA have said something. I'm just parroting what UEFA have said.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with them, but that's what they said.
Timing and local rivals is very important to factor. E-Ink, I don't know what is that for. It depends on the fan base. When Papa Beard Mo sent me a DM. He sent me a DM, my add to the convo. He sent me a DM who has a picture. It's Chelsea has more reach compared to Arsenal in Europe, actually. That's what he said, especially Eastern Europe. Only in England, Arsenal have more fans. And in Africa, Chelsea have more reach. I actually don't think this is measurable, by the way. You cannot measure these things. I really doubt that you can actually measure Papa Beard how what the number of fans actually, because is it the number of followers on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook? Is it viewership? Well, Arsenal might play Man City. Who says that people watch it for Man City or Arsenal? Arsenal play Man United. Can you say is it for Arsenal? Is it a Man United fan? It's actually cannot be measured at all.
There are some ways of measuring it. I think I saw a thing, the 5 biggest, most viewed games in the US last season. I think 3 of them involved United, 3 involved Arsenal, 3 involved Liverpool, 1 involved City, I think.
But can I tell you one thing, Rory? Do you know that the record for a game to be watched in the United States? 3 million people only out of 350 million. By the way, the global reach in America is not as big. NBC makes it look big. It's not actually big. People would watch American football in the morning rather than watch Liverpool play Manchester United. I live here and I know that for a fact.
You can judge it based off broadcast revenue.
Yeah, it's not great here. It's not fantastic here. Like 3 million people to watch one of the biggest games. This is just London watching this, or arguably Cairo in Egypt or Saudi Arabia will have more people than that, basically. Anyway, I don't think there's any time to talk about the transfers, guys. We'll talk about transfers the other day. I think the transfers are exciting anyway. They aren't exciting anyway. But I'm glad that we didn't talk about Olise and Chelsea and all this stuff.
Nah, that's boring.
Actually, I thought it was an intellectual conversation. Completely enjoyed that. It's different than all the other shows that we do. That's why the Rational League is just different. It's a different show. Of course. Turn on the notification bell. Listen, this is going to take us to Football Terrace with the top 6 is there. And later, I'll be live on MHF. And I will be live, actually, Italy versus Croatia. You would want to tune into that. Rory's going to be live on TIFO, I'm assuming. I'll be live on Footy JUDGEMO for Italy versus Croatia. Guys, so come in and support. You're going to see if you want to see tears or you want to see joy. And then Rory and Nobbins in the description, the channels. Make sure to subscribe to these guys. They're 1 click away from subscription. I really hope that every one of them get 100 subs at least from you guys if you haven't. And we'll see you guys soon. And we're out of here, people. Thank you so much for being here.